Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you. I wish I had greater news about, the hurricane situation where now we are hunkering down with Hurricane Milton. And my prayers and best wishes goes out to everyone here in Florida, and specifically in the areas that has been targeted by this hurricane. We thank you all for your prayers, your support, and your donations. Please reach out to your local schools, your local food banks, or whatever, and check up on those that that are in these areas. I'm here near the Tampa Bay area, so please help us out however you can. Thank you so much in advance. With that said, I'm going to now go into the podcast. First things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. It will be featured on the X Factor EDU network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph. You can also find it on Spotify. You can also find it on social media. I'm doing my best to get the messages out on every platform you can think of. Please make sure you're really supporting the X Factor EDU network. Go and visit those podcasts. There's so many different people that have podcasts and platforms on that platform, and we appreciate your support. And so with that said, I also wanted to invite you guys to check out my social media handles when you get a chance. Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indy Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indy238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. In addition to that, I do have a couple of upcoming events. So I am scheduled to be at the Nebraska Teachers of Math Conference. I'm also scheduled to speak at ICTM in Iowa, OCTM in Ohio. I was scheduled to also speak at the ATM&E in New Hampshire. We'll also be at the Northwest Conference, also looking into the South Carolina Conference coming up, and the Making Math Moments Conference, also the FAMT Conference, and the FAMS Ignite Speaker. I'll be at the FAMS Conference as well. Some of these conferences, if I am not able to make it due to the hurricane and whatever, thank you for the opportunity. We will postpone and reschedule for maybe the following year or whatever. Thank you so much in advance for understanding that. I also wanted to invite you guys to check out the website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, and to schedule me for your next speaking or coaching event. And I want to say here, I have been very busy doing my best to upload the website for you guys. I have so many different TikTok reels that I've been posting on there of all of you rock stars at these national math conferences, where you've shared your insight, you've shared testimonials, so you'll be able to see yourselves there. I'm also sharing blogs. I just did a blog about grit, and also some other blogs about just how we can continue to bridge the gap together. There's blogs of, equity and things like that as well on my website, but go ahead and take a look at some of the latest works that I've just did a couple days ago. I appreciate your support. Please share it with a friend, a family member, a faculty member, and whatnot. In addition to that, please check out the Grit Mini Workshop. Some of you guys have been able to check it out. I know this platform has, just like the X Factor EDU network, has so many different voices. The grassroots workshops also has so many different voices, and I'm grateful to be one of the voices out of a plethora of voices on this platform. So please support my Grit workshop there. You can also support the other workshops that you'll see there. And if you're looking for online tutoring, I would be honored to service you guys. So go ahead and check out the Grit Academy online tutoring. If you're needing, applications or whatever information, I'd be honored to give it to you. Just send me an email. If your school is wanting to maybe have me come in as a vendor and support you guys, please send me an email and we will work things out. Thank you. Now, this podcast is if you are trying to close the achievement gap, but you're having classroom management issues, or your students just aren't motivated to do the work, then you're going to join this Grit and Equity Talks podcast, and we're going to work out the issues together. So today, I want to talk about, I talk a lot about grit. I love me some grit. I really do. But I also love talking about equity and talking about what we need to do to bridge the gap. And I want to talk about it in a way that is not detrimental, in a way that's not beating anybody up, but help all of us understand why this really has become a pivotal issue in the way we do things. And I want to, give a shout out to one of the rock star leaders that I had a while ago, who I went to their school district to do some consultation. And I was asking them about textbooks and about educational professional development and things like that. And this leader was so honest with me. And they said to me, India, my fourth grade brown and black kids cannot read. What are you going to do about that? And they didn't care about what I had to offer. They didn't care about the next shiny little gadget. They needed solutions and resources. They were in the trenches and they had it up to here. And I knew when they expressed this to me, there was such a soberness to this that I felt like I needed to do something, and I needed to do more than just talk about something. And this is why I'm so happy that we do have champions in the field, these equity champions that are doing great work, that are helping us to understand the work of equity. And so I kind of want to come on here and just kind of join their voice and join alongside them, and just kind of break it down on my platform of what equity is and why it's important. Why does equity count? I mean, I wrote a whole book about equity and why equity counts, being in Florida, because I know that there is a need for equity. And so with that said, we're going to navigate and talk a little bit about equity. So first things first, I do want to talk about the definition of equity. I like to give the NCTM, National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, definition. They say that equity is when we as educators or leaders provide resources and accommodations as needed to promote access and attainment for all learners. And so why is this so important? Well, because we're not meeting the needs of all learners. If we were meeting the needs of all learners, we wouldn't have to talk about it. If we did have all students graduating, we wouldn't have to look at this. I also want to say something. Equity is more than just focusing on the external things, the external characteristics of a student. For instance, it's more than race. It's more than their height. It's more than their gender. It's more than it's all of these things combined. So equity, it's dealing with race, socioeconomic status, mental health, emotional health. It's dealing with gender. Yes, it's dealing with religion. It's dealing with so many different things. And I like to think of equity as a trip to the fair or a trip to the skating rink. I like the skating rink because when you go to the skating rink, everyone is given an opportunity to skate at whatever level they are at. You have to give them the resources and the accommodations as needed. Some people come in to skate and they are like gifted. There's this guy at the skating rink that is near my place. And whenever I take my kids skating, there is this older guy and he is literally twirling, like doing these like circular motions all around the skating rink on his skates. And he doesn't have rollerblades. He has like the older skates. And he's comfortable. He's not missing a beat. He's dancing to the music. He's having the time of his life. Then there's little kids that are like 7, 8 years old that need one of the little white skater. It's like a skater walker kind of thing. And they have the skater walker and they're barely knowing how to get on the skating floor. And they're taking their time. And guess what? I'm joining them. And we're against the wall. And we're taking our precious time so we don't bust our behinds trying to skate. So you have all of us at all of our different levels trying to skate. But guess what? The skating rink understood. You're going to have the Indians out there that barely know what they're doing. And then you're going to have the guy out there that is twirling. And then they even have it where they shut down the whole skating rink and the guys can race each other like cars. And they just go round, like insane. Everyone can skate if they want to skate. And the skating rink has set it up so everyone can be successful at the level that they're at. That is equity. Equity says you might need a little bit more support. You might not need that much support, but in case you do, here's the support for everyone. That is equity. Equity in one word for me would be relief. It's providing relief for people at the levels that they're at. The guy that was skating around, he didn't need a lot of relief. He just wanted a platform to express his talent, to express the work that it's taken for him to skate all those years. And now he can show off, rightfully so. And we love it We like seeing that. We're like, wow, that's awesome. Maybe one day we'll get to that level. Right now, not quite, right? But maybe it's something to aspire to be. That's how it should be in education. That's how it should be when you're dealing with equity with students. It should be that the classroom is set up to a way where you provide relief for students and you provide the platform that if the students have had that much relief, that they can shine and they can be celebrated at the level that they're at. So why does equity count? Now I want to go into an article with you guys that I found that talks a little bit about equity, and it talks more about this. And I want to talk about the fiscal matters of equity with us. Okay, so matters. So here, this is an Ed Week article. It says Title I explained 5 things educators need to understand about federal monies of students in poverty. Now, why are we talking about this? Because usually when you're dealing with equity, it does deal with Title I funding. It says nearly every district in the county receives at least some money through Title I, $15.4 billion federal dollar program to help educate low-income students. Okay, policymakers have debated ways to update Title I, which talks about the ESEA Act, or the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. So there's a lot of money into this. And why? Because one, disadvantaged students who pay for Title I are not always the ones served by Title I. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So it says here, 70% of public schools and half of all public school children receive educational services paid for with Title I, but whether they are poor or not, having anything to do with how their school paid for those services. 2 of the reasons why: eligibility and school-wide programs. And then let's keep going. Grants. Grants are another way. So grants, they're based on the number of children in a district's catchment area who are ages 5 through 17 and either from low-income families or those that are homeless or in foster care or in facilities of neglect or delinquent children. Excuse me. It says here, some of those additional families, they receive temporary support. They're also counted. So these students, they're not always enrolled in the district, and the district may get money based on children who are homeschooled in private schools or alternative program, but a district with a preschool that serves low-income 3 to 4-year-olds won't have funding based on those students because they're not old enough. Oh, poor babies. It says funding is determined by how many eligible children live in a district, not how many students in poverty attend a particular school. So very interesting. Moreover, any school with at least 40% of its students in poverty can opt to use a school-wide program rather than target specific students using the money. So more than 9 out of 10 students who receive Title I services do so through a school-wide program, but not all of them are poor themselves. So studies have suggested that these school-wide programs offer more flexibility to district leaders, but they're not trained enough on how to use money more creatively. So in the end, about 11.6 million students are eligible and counted for deciding a district's Title I money, but some 25 million students receive Title I services. That's a lot of students, 25 million. So second reason, so it talks about not all of the grants tend to push money towards the highest poverty schools. So Title I is actually comprised of 4 related grants, each serving slightly different needs and following a slightly different formula. So it talks about basic grants that goes to any district with at least 10 eligible children and at least 2% of all school-age children in the school district. Okay. The next one, concentration grants, goes to districts with more than 6,500 eligible children or 15% of all school-age children living in the district. Targeted grants use a weighting system that favors districts with either a high number or percentages of eligible children, whichever is larger. And then, of course, education finance incentive grants. So those are EFIGs. They go through more complex process. This grant is weighted to favor districts with higher number of percentages of eligible children, but also adjusts the grants to favor states to spend more capital on education than those where there is a smaller gap between the districts that spend the most and least per pupil. So that's another reason. And then let's keep going. Another reason, the third reason why educators need to understand federal money about students in poverty, it's because your district and states, their sizes make up the difference. So look at this. I was just checking this graph out earlier. So this here is talking about the range of allocations per formula. And so if you're in a larger city, you're getting about 2,200 per child. Okay. And then federal dollars. A rural city is getting about 3,600 per child. So depending on where you're at, that allocation there, it varies, but you can still see on average you're getting about 2,500 per child. Okay. And so look, it says here, but individual states do make a big difference. So 2 remote rural high poverty school districts, one in California, received $1,144 per eligible child in the fiscal year 2015, which was lower than that national average of $1,313. But a few states away, like in North Dakota, they had $2,880 per child. Why? Well, in part, this is because each state must receive at least 0.5% of the total nationwide Title I pot. And small states like North Dakota, whose Title I grants didn't meet that minimum, they get bumped up to that threshold. So it's like they're leveling the playing field. So this is a lot to take in, but it just shows us that, there is a need for equity. And like I said before at the beginning, we're spending $15.4 billion on equity. So this is not a light thing for our nation. This is definitely something that we need to understand. How can we help? How can we contribute and to support schools and, the federal dollars that are there to help service our kids. So with that said, I'll look at these other reasons briefly with you guys, and then we'll proceed from there. The third reason why their educators need to understand equity is that schools with rising poverty may lose out on schools with shrinking poverty. So population shifts, sometimes dramatically from year to year, and the federal support intentionally tries not to count this against districts. Unless the district is no longer has a need for a basic grant, like 15 children or 2% of its age population, it's held harmless, and the funding cannot be cut more than 15% in a given year. So holding districts harmless can help cushion the blow of changing demographics, but it also can hamstring districts with rising poverty rates because awarding the grant is a zero-sum game. As the report describes, out of 12,986 districts eligible for basic grants, only 2,683 have been held harmless. Wow. So then it says, when states met the minimum requirements of these districts, the remaining pool was smaller. That meant 517 new districts didn't meet the minimum hold harmless grants. And then meeting the second group's minimum grants pushed another 22 districts out of their minimum grants, and so on. So in the end, many districts rising poverty who would have qualified for more money, they were left with no additional money once all the districts were held harmless. And here's the last reason. All of this means nothing until Congress passes the budget. So every year, Congress approves spending for Title I, the formula that helps districts understand what portion of actual pot they get. So 4 Title I grants were authorized for $181.7 billion, but Congress ultimately only appropriated, $14.3 billion. So still in the billions, that it's still a need. But it's something to take in as to why we're doing this work. And the people that best can serve, and not only do we need to service these kids of, marginalized communities, students in poverty, we also need to support those that can effectively serve those kids. Not everyone can do this job. I think doing the work of equity, it takes a special type of person, someone that has walked through some of the suffering and can speak to those levels of need that the kids, they need serviced in. I don't think just everyone should be plopped up. I think it should really be those that have been through something, that can understand, that can speak the language of those kids. And so, that was a little bit about why equity counts. And now I want to go into another thing with us. So we understand there's a lot of money in this, and there's a lot of dollars, and there's a lot of need. And we understand that, poverty is definitely one of the main tiers of equity and why we need equitable services, but it's deeper than that, right? And so I now want to talk about another find for us. Schools that lead. So this is the blog that they did, and they wrote this in February. And so it says equity in education demands that every student, regardless of their background or personal attributes, has access to the resources and opportunities they need to receive. So it says promoting equity in schools leads to better outcomes for all students, closes achievement gaps, and strengthens communities. Why equity in education matters. Equity in education creates both moral and pragmatic imperatives for communities. It also unlocks the potential for marginalized youth to benefit of all, ensuring equitable access to quality education for students, regardless of their gender, race, ethnicity, language, disability, family background, socioeconomic status, is crucial for several reasons. So let's look at the reasons. First reason, equal opportunity. Yes, lack of equity sustains intergenerational cycles of poverty. And I think, when you're doing this work of equity, what you'll find is that there's not really any turning back. You either want all kids served and you want to do something about it, or you're going to have to move out of the way. But either way, students will get what they need. So you can be a part of it, or you can try to push back against it. But we're finding now is that the need is so great that you probably want to get on board and do your part, the best that you know how to do it without getting in the way of those that are really trying to effectively do this work. So there's a need. That's all I can say. There's a need. And there always, unfortunately, will be a need, especially as we see that kids are dropping out and the poverty, in our country is not going away. We need to support our families and our students the best way that we can. So let's keep going. So the next thing they say is social mobility. So equity in education, it enables upward social mobility against or across generations, allows for children of disadvantaged families to attain higher living standards and occupy better socioeconomic positions than their parents. We have to want that for our kids. So again, equity in education enables upward social mobility across generations, allowing children from disadvantaged families to attain higher living standards and occupy better socioeconomic positions than their parents. We have to want that for our kids. Now, economic impact. Equitable education unlocks the nation's economic potential, boosting workforce productivity as students gain industry skills and can transition smoothly into skilled employment. Over the course of 40 years, educational equity can raise a country's GDP per capita by 23%. Health. Yes, positive health outcomes, affordable healthcare procedures, access, right, to healthy foods, and more time to exercise. There's also social cohesion, right? So intercultural experiences foster greater mutual understanding. There's global development goals, positive classroom environment. Students who experience equity in education can become empathetic and responsible citizens and leaders. And so it's imperative that we have that. And with that, they're going to talk about 10 research-backed methods for promoting equity in education. So they say we can cultivate inclusive leadership. Okay. Evaluate policies for built-in biases. This is very important. Yes, there are built-in biases of any organization, any school. That's just because we're human. So, but unfortunately, it says school policies often inadvertently perpetuate racial and other inequities. So educators striving to promote equity must evaluate current policies with an equity lens to uncover any built-in biases that disadvantage certain students. So look, an analysis of suspension data. I don't know why we're not talking more about suspension data of students. I think this is imperative for every school district, and I think every school leader should know what the suspension rates look like, in particular for BIPOC communities. So it says it found that Black students lost 103 per 100 students enrolled due to exclusionary discipline. Oh my word. They lost 103 days in school per 100 students enrolled, compared to just 21 days for white students, evidence of implicit biases. So a black student will lose 103 days. A white student will lose 21 days. And then they're taking the same tests, they're taking the same classes, they're applying to the same universities, and we wonder why, unfortunately, that can lead to some discrepancies into who's getting in, who's not, and things like that, right? Look here, it says implement bias-free hiring practices. Educator diversity positively impacts all students, leading to increased academic performance, improved attendance, and higher graduation among students of color. Yet, U.S. teaching force remains predominantly white. Yeah, we've got over 80% that are Caucasian, right? It says unconscious bias often negatively influences hiring decisions, preventing schools from diversifying their staff. And that is unfortunate, and it's very real. And many people can be qualified, but depending on that school culture, if they don't want that diversity, then they will block people and gatekeep and keep certain people out, even if they're qualified. And that has to be looked into, right? So here, look at number 4, provide ongoing professional development. Teachers urgently want better tools, resources, and training to reach and teach all their children in the classrooms more effectively. However, they also frequently need more ongoing support to build skills in a culturally responsive, anti-biased, and trauma-informed instructional practices. So this is going to keep going. They talk about bridging technology divides. I mean, COVID cost like a 30 to 40% gap in students in rural communities that were using technology. They didn't have access. So look here, it says equitable schools work proactively to bridge unintended consequences of digital revolution on their campuses. And then the last one here, engaging families. Too often, cultural, linguistic, and scheduling barriers prevent schools from moving beyond surface level gestures to adequately understand and integrate diverse families' perspectives. So schools should consider flexibility for working parents. Yes, with scheduling events, providing interpreters and translators for multilingual communications, and holding neighborhood-based parent meetings to reinforce community cultural wealth and creating welcoming visitor support centers on campus. So that's a little bit of that article. I'm not going to go too much more into that. That's a little bit about why equity counts. And I think we just have to get quiet and figure out, like, how can we contribute? I think if we're against helping to meet the needs of students, we really got to check our hearts and check like what's going on, and why we would be against, making sure all students can be set up for success. So with that said, thanks so much for joining me again on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. And I'm so thrilled that you were able to join me. So again, this Grit and Equity Talks podcast will be featured on the X Factor EDU network. It's hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph, and it can be found on Spotify. You can also find it on all of my social media platforms as well. You can also follow me on social media. Facebook is Miss India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. LinkedIn is The India White. Instagram's Indie238. YouTube is India White 123. TikTok is Dr. India White. Check out my website at www.india-white.com for books, blogs, and thank you to those that are doing this to schedule me for your next speaking event. I'd be honored to join you in your platforms. We're already looking also into 2025 for coming into your schools and doing some work. Some of the other upcoming events we have here, NATM conference, we have the ICTM conference, we have the Ohio conference. Best wishes to all those in Ohio. Not sure what's going to happen with this hurricane, but not sure if I can join you, but I send my love anyway. And then ATM&E conference, Northwest conference, South Carolina conference, Making Math Moments with so many rock stars. Oh my goodness. And the FAMT conference, looking forward to that, and looking forward to the Ignite session at the FAMS conference in Florida. Check out the Grit Mini Workshop when you get a chance. That's on the Grassroots Workshops website. And give me a ring if you're needing tutoring for your student or for your school at the Grit Academy. I would love to work with you guys. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this with you. And thank you so much for all of you for your prayers and your support as we're undergoing this situation with the Hurricane Milton and all that. And I wish all of you guys the best. Stay safe. You're in my prayers and happy thoughts to all of you. So with that said, till next time, stay gritty and do right by everyone.